welcome to Nijo Castle, one of the most famous castles to ever be built in history, and it is still standing today. I'm going to walk you through the site and I'll explain the historical significance as we go. Alright, bear with me. Okay, a little bit of background here about the shogunate. In the 12th century, a group of feudal lords actually gained significant control, and essentially through a political coup, they overthrew the imperial family. They did this with the assistance of samurai who they hired to help protect them in this process. And essentially two main families fought for political control over the imperial court, and they won it. And it lasted until the 19th century, essentially until around 1860. And we'll get into that history a little bit later. What's significant is that the shogunate essentially was a group of military leaders who fought for control over several hundred years, which means that this was an incredibly tumultuous period in Japanese history. The reason that I am showing you this exact site while we speak about the shogunate is that this is actually the site, Nijo Castle, is the site where the Tokugawa shogunate essentially started their reign. And it is also the site where the Tokugawa clan or shogunate family also relinquished their power back to the imperial court. So this is a significant site for two main reasons. Another reason that makes this important is that we're looking here at a particular style of architecture that developed in this period, essentially in the year 1603. And it's this period right around the very end of the 16th century, the very beginning of the 17th century, that we start to see what are called fortified castles. Nijo Castle is one of the most famous of all time ever made. And when we even think about the date 1603, that's about pretty close to the time period when Louis XIV was building his palace of Versailles. There are some similarities between Nijo and Versailles, and we'll get into those as we walk in the interior. But for now, I just wanted to show you this incredible fortified section on the exterior wall here of Nijo Castle. Okay, we're standing here at the exterior now of Nijo, and you can really see these incredibly high stone walls and also this wide moat. These were meant to be protective against any kind of attack that might be coming toward the castle, which makes perfect sense because this marked a time period essentially when feudal lords were fighting against each other, and a civil war had been ongoing for about 50 years when this site was built. So this fortification was probably pretty necessary at the time. Couple of things. Again, this high stone wall would have been challenging for any incoming force to climb. Also, you can see these slits here in these almost windows, which would have been used for either pouring some kind of boiling liquid down upon any incoming attack, or also could have been used for actually for shooting out of. Two things that were significant in changing the architecture of this time. One was the influx of nails, actually. And I mentioned when we were looking at Issei that no nails were used at all in the construction. And here we see that use pretty substantially. And actually, if I just turn here to part of the gate, you can see the nails in the gate here, even actually used as decor. The other significant influence came from overseas, and that is the use of muskets, of guns. And so actually these window fittings would have been used in this time to shoot from using contemporary guns. Okay, we're just going to walk through the gate. Gosh, to give you a sense of scale, you can see how incredibly enormous this beautiful gate is. As I mentioned, at the time period that Nijo was built, Japan had recently just gone through a really pretty vicious civil war for about 50 years. And one thing that's remarkable about Nijo that's quite different from other castles that were built at this time is that it was built to impress. Not only to be fortified, in other words, to really protect the shogun from any incoming forces, but also to intimidate any incoming visitors. And that would actually include the imperial family themselves. And I think that I wanted to mention that even though the shoguns had essentially taken over political control, the imperial family did still exist, and they were still brought in for certain issues into discussion. This would be actually a site where messengers would come from the imperial family to bring messages to the shogun of Tokugawa. So the reason for this opulent gate is to impress and to awe any person that was to enter. And it absolutely is awesome. Just zooming in here so you can see the incredible detail, just the beautiful sculptural work, and also the scale. This is impressive to an incredible degree. And this would be the entrance to the Tokugawa family residence, which is what we see straight ahead of us. Also incredibly opulent and beautiful in its styling, and also the incredible use of gold leaf, as you can see here. That gold leaf does not end or only pertain to the exterior of the building, but the many screen paintings on the interior are also completely covered with gold leaf. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to take any photographs or video on the interior, and so I'll be uploading a PowerPoint of images shortly. Okay, as I mentioned, this site is meant to impress, and it absolutely does. Again, the incredible use of gold leaf on the exterior, the use of gold leaf on the interior, and in that way, the many similarities that can be found between this castle and the Palace Versailles. Again, built within the same century in different parts of the world, but with the same goals in mind: to impress, to intimidate, and to also subjugate those who are around you who have significant power. One way that the Tokugawa shogunate did that was to actually order all of the lords in Japan to pay for the building of Nijo Castle, to pay for the home of the shogun himself. This was a way of exerting complete political control over those around you. Another way to exert political control was to basically restrict access. That if you were not a person of significance, you were not allowed into this inner area, into the residence area, and certainly not into the building itself. You would have to be a person of high-ranking social class to be permitted entry into the building. And a last example of exerting control over those around you, for example, the daimyo lords, who were the highest ranking lords in Japan, would be to restrict what styles and what types of buildings could be built throughout Japan outside of Nijo Castle. For example, building fortified castles were restricted significantly, and you might wonder why that is. The function of these castles also changed significantly. They became sites where the imperial family would send messages to the Tokugawa clan, and obviously this particular site was meant to intimidate any messenger coming here. One thing you might also notice about this building is how incredibly low it is. That it's not raised up high above the ground as other castles in this time period were originally built. And the reason is that originally there actually was a donjon at the center of this entire complex, which would have been basically a high tower, which would have been completely fortified and the safest location for the shogun if an attack were to occur. When it burned down, the Tokugawa shogunate decided to not rebuild it. And this was really a significant symbol of essentially stating that that type of warfare had ended here in Japan. And in many ways, that was incredibly true. They also actually banned any construction of donjons in Japan entirely, so disallowing any other site to be safer than this site. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the site where the Tokugawa shogunate essentially began their rule and also ended their rule. And when they ended their rule, they gave power back to the imperial family. That's the first time in 700 years that the imperial family actually took back political control. And this again is the site that marks that transition. One of the reasons for the downfall of the Tokugawa shogunate is actually the kind of the disparity of wealth that occurred in this time period between the feudal lords themselves, which were called daimyo, and also the samurai themselves. And remember, the samurai had protected the daimyo, or the feudal lords, in achieving that political coup over the imperial family. What essentially happened was an issue with taxation, and that there was a sudden strict separation of class that really had not occurred in any shogunate prior to the Tokugawa shogunate. In other words, the samurai class were significantly lower during this time period, and their acquiring of wealth became more and more challenging due to taxation measures put forward by the shogunate. Essentially, this ended up leading to just really, difficult time period, a very tumultuous time period between these two class systems. And you can really see it when you look at this building. When you think about where the wealth is going. Is it going more equally to the samurai who have helped the shogunate stay in power, or does it go really quite right to the top, to the shogun himself, as we see in this beautiful and opulent gate? That opulence was really celebrated and really promoted in ways that had never been done before. And we really see the evidence of it today. It's incredibly beautiful to look at, but it definitely shows maybe some of the writing on the wall for the demise of the shogun and the shogunate themselves. This is similar to the tale of Louis XIV, whose later relative Louis XVI fell from power for almost the same reasons, essentially acquiring wealth and not sharing